Drum roll. Hey, look, it's working.
Hey, cool.
How fancy is that?
Ooh, Barrett Dorner is live on Facebook.
There you go. So now you guys can share that. And if people can't get in on Zoom, they can watch it there. Or if they don't want to watch it on YouTube later, they can watch it on Facebook. Because I might stop putting them on YouTube. That'd be convenient. Anyway, welcome to Kitchen Table Talk for what the hell day is it? January
Friday
29th.
the 29th.
Yeah, it's almost February already of some year. We'll go around the room and do the usual introductions for the people that are here at the beginning of the whole thing. And then we'll just shoot the shit, see what comes up. Tony, we'll start with you and then hot potato from there.
All right. Evening, everybody. My name's Tony Combs, formerly Toledo Fire, now with Providence Township Fire and Rescue.
Always good to see you.
See you too. Much better lighting.
Evan, you're pretty talkative. Go ahead and introduce both of you guys.
My name's Evan Myers. I am a lieutenant with RMI International. We provide plant protection services for AK Steel. I'm up at Butler Works. We do everything from fire suppression, hazmat, rescue, EMS, a lot of confined space rescue, a lot of high angle rescue. We also do on paper provide security, but we don't really do that. Kind of pre-G1 status. And then my partner is Mike Berta. He's also a lieutenant here. For some reason, they have both of us working together tonight. And we're joining in from our Chevy Silverado looking at the giant electric arc furnace.
Well, I think we know who's supervising who.
He's technically the supervisor right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Split it 50-50.
Yeah, because I'm the rescue lieutenant, so I'm in charge of all our rescue services. He's in charge of fire suppression. So.
Gotcha.
Yep.
All right. Chad needs no introduction because he's got a lower third beneath him.
Oh boy.
This is what happens when I have too much time. Yes, I'm Chad with Providence Township Fire and Rescue. I'm a captain. Been out there for about 8 years now here.
Awesome. And evidently the resident idiot. That's hard to say. Resident idiot. Enunciation's key. Tyler, you're up.
I'm Tyler Ellis. Been in the fire service for about 8 years now. I'm a lieutenant paramedic at Middleton Township.
Chief.
Hello. Oh, hang on here. Hello. My name is Jason Francis. I'm with the White House Fire Department, currently the deputy chief out there, and have 22 years of experience.
I thought you were just going to say hello and then just leave. Like, just, I was going to be really impressed with that power move. Kyler.
Kyler with Delta Fire. I've got 7 years at Delta and going up on almost 10 years in the fire service.
Awesome.
Go for lieutenant too.
Go Riley next. We'll end with.
Name's Riley.
That's firm. We'll be on the way. All right, we gotta go first. We'll see.
That's where you're leaving it. Tell us where are you from? I don't know which Riley we got.
I'm sitting next to Mike, so I can't. It's going back and forth.
That makes sense. All right, and then Fireground Training Bureau's own Mike Lord is. Oh, he is there still. I thought.
Hey, how come you get to introduce me?
I didn't tell people about you. That was like an honor thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no.
You were just like, you were just rolling the
red
carpet out.
I was rolling it out so you could speak.
Oh, I appreciate you.
Because God knows I can't stop you.
Yes, I am Fireground's own Mike Lord. I work for Rossford Fire, Lake Township Fire. I am Deputy Chief Jason Francis's favorite employee at White House. And I do some time out at Providence as well. So I am your local bouncer arounder. And I have 365 days worth of experience in the fire and EMS service. I'm just kidding. But yes, my name is Mike Lord, and Riley Nelson is my partner for the night, so he is right next to me. Riley's a good guy, works for ProMedica and here at Lake Township.
Nice. There was a chance there was another Riley that I know, and I wasn't sure if it was just somebody messing with me. So that was, because who would do that? Oh, wow, I did something wrong there. Okay, so anyway, I don't need to hear myself twice, which is figuring out this whole Facebook Live thing so people can hopefully see what we're talking about. And if they want to chat, they can chat. And if not, they can just watch. I don't know who's dialed in on the phone, but I'm hoping that phone number doesn't show up on Facebook. Let me make sure. Nope, it doesn't look like it does. Who's on the phone? You're the first caller.
That would be me. I'm on my phone.
No, somebody's got a phone number up. I can't say what it. The last 2 digits are 83. I guess they're. Oh, is that Chad? Is that your wifey creeping? I don't know who it is. All right. Well, doesn't matter. Anyway. So, the first thing I want to talk about, I took an awesome webinar over the weekend, and it was it was presented by Don Abbott. He's the guy behind projectmayday.net. I think we talked about that before. If we didn't talk about that here, I've talked about it elsewhere. But on the Fireground training page, there is a fireground4.com. You can look at all the notes I took. Not that that's a primary source thing, but only so many people could go to this webinar and look up different things that caught my attention, and then follow up however you see fit. Don Abbott has all the information. He and his wife started this. They've studied over 9,000 Mayday calls, audio, the incidents themselves. And it was obviously the timing, especially meaningful for me, being at a department where on January 26th, we marked 7 years since we lost Steve Machinsky and Jamie Dickman in a fire on Magnolia Street. It doesn't feel like it's been 7 years, but it's been 7 years. And so that was Tuesday. And then today, if you guys hadn't heard, in Oklahoma, the initial reports are that 2 firefighters died when roof collapsed in a single family residence. They were the callers were the homeowners in the back bedroom saying, our house is on fire, we can't get out. They went in to try and make the rescue, give these people their last best chance, doing exactly what they signed up to do, and didn't make it out. The 2 citizens didn't make it out either. So 2 firefighters and 2 citizens. So I don't normally start like this, but just with this week and today, that happened at 3 this morning in Oklahoma. Just want to kind of take a moment and just kind of reflect on that and think about the sacrifices and think about what we all signed up to do, and just kind of have a moment of silence. And there's a video of that scene we shared on Fireground Training's Facebook page too, from way after the fact, but kind of gives you an idea of what the conditions were they were up against this morning in Oklahoma. One of the interesting things with that, and I'm going to pull that up right now so I can take a look at one of the interesting things with that. Did anybody get a chance to read that yet? I know I shared it, but it was the weekend.
I only read what you just said on Facebook today.
Okay. They usually get 4 or 4.5 Mayday reports a day, which is just, it's crazy to think it happens that often without us realizing, because most of the time it clearly resolves, or there's maybe an injury versus a death and it doesn't make it outside like the local news area. A lot of firefighter close calls, there's a lot of those kind of websites, Statter, that typically if there's a Mayday, we're going to hear about it somehow, some way. But I thought this was interesting. So 6% of maydays inside a vehicle, like with the incident commander inside the vehicle, only 6% are missed the first time. That means 94% of maydays that are called are heard by incident commanders when they're inside a vehicle. And because I know this is a controversial topic, but I'm also a believer in data, I want to know what your guys' take is. From both perspectives. We've got every level of firefighter all the way through deputy chief here, and probably going to have more people hop on as the night goes on. But what's your take when you look at how we do things in general? I mean, how many of you, I took a poll on Facebook, and you know what, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the majority of people said they're running command from the front yard or from the sidewalk. And it was one of those moments where I'm listening to this guy who studied, I'll give you the specific number, as of the 22nd of January, 9,143 maydays, and 94% of the time they were called and the incident commander was in the car, they were heard. And I'm trying to get you the alternate to that. Oh, I missed that. I'll have to look up exactly. The stats for outside the car were staggeringly different. Missed way more often. And I'll look those up here when we maybe take a break for a second. But what are you guys' thoughts? Who does command from the car? Anybody that's on the call?
Barrett and Stan Turner. I do.
Hey. Yeah, well, of course you do. Welcome, Dan.
Hey, I run command from the car, and then I also actually had a pretty cool opportunity to be a battalion aide, actually for a little while, or a fill-in battalion aide. So our general rule of thumb was that if it was a first alarm with like a working fire type dispatch, we call it a RIT 1, but just for simplicity, we just call it working fire. It would be run from the inside of the car. So depending on who the battalion chief was, they either want me to get dressed and go give them a second side Charlie report and go inside and go meet up with the first engine, or I was to run their command board for them. If we went to a second alarm, I was definitely coming back to the buggy, and then we were going to the back fold up where they have all the larger command boards, the more command boards, the second and third radio. There's 2 radios that are up front, but there's more radios in the back. That's typically how we ran. Just as things got more amped up, that's how we would run it. Just because we needed more space, really, we needed more boards in order to run, our staging and second alarm units, especially as again the high rise and such. That's just typically what we did. I'm a big proponent of running from the car, just because I can hear anything. I'm all about chiefs that are wanting to be out there with the guys and wanting to stand out, in the elements in the scene here with their feeling. But I don't need to do my own 360 because I really trust the guys that are showing up, on the rigs. I trust what they have to say. And if the conditions, if I can see that's really dark smoke coming from the back and they're saying light smoke, or I think there might be fire showing back there, but they said nothing, I might have my safety is going to go give me another lap. But, if the OV's back there throwing ladders and sees that, conditions are changing or there's fire showing, they have the free reign to say, hey, command from ladder 2 OV, I got fire show inside Charlie now from the first floor. Oh, okay. That's a problem. Or whatever. This is a really long-winded way of saying I run it from the car, really, because I'm very trustworthy of the boots that I have on the ground. I don't need to hear everything that's going on outside. I can hear the radio a lot better if I'm alone in the car, or if I have one other person with me in the car.
What kind of staffing are you getting though on your first alarm assignment?
So
I'm playing devil's advocate to my own question, and then we'll talk about because I don't want to feel like we're ganging up on anybody, because you and I have an experience we can talk about with that, and we'll get there. But I want to talk about, the downfalls for some of these other folks, right? So
Yeah.
so yeah, what are you getting on your first alarm assignment that you're able to do that?
So I'll do the duality of it both at home and also at work. So at work, we have about 30 people I go to an initial assignment, and then we'll get 10 more for work and fire dispatch, or for our RIT 1. Those 10 people are they're only supposed to be fulfilling RIT. Sometimes they get used to fill in other gaps. But for the most part, they're dedicated to RIT. If you need more, you can special request another engine or special a truck or something like that. But at work, we're getting 30 people on initial. Where I live, you have no idea. It's the volunteer system like we're all used to. Hopefully you have your 10 best showing up, but more likely you're going to get 2 or 3 pretty good guys, 1 or 2 okay guys, maybe 1 or 2 not great guys, or just some guys that need coaching up. So to answer that, like, I really don't know. Sometimes my engine's getting out with 4 dudes, and I hear the voice on the radio and I'm like, oh man, that's Captain Square, he's good to go. Or I hear my guy on the radio that is not really a go-getter, not very confident in his skills, and he might need some coaching to help do this. And that's really what I'm going to use other apparatus as they come. I hear on engine 3 there's squared away doing engine 3.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm probably going to assign engine 4 and engine 3 together just because I know this guy's going to really help engine 4 get the job done.
Gotcha.
And if I don't have enough resources, I ask for more. It's not uncommon. And I've talked about this with other incident commanders in the county that I live in, is to go outside the county where there's additional outside the county where I live in, where there's additional staffing. Because I know if I call for engine 626 in Loudoun County, that's going to come with 3 people. And if I call for the ambulance, that's going to come with 2 more. I know I can call for Berkeley engine 60, that's going to come with 5 people. They're farther away, but at least I know I'm going to get it. And the county's so small, we're dumping the whole county on a building fire anyway. So it's not really like it's that we're passing a bunch of people in order to get to those companies. I'm not advocating for that. But I think I'm done talking.
And so that percentage that out of the votes that I got from, well, there's kind of a mix, because I think some of my non-fire friends answered this question too, not having a clue what I was asking. But 67 to 33%, it looks like that's still pretty accurate. The majority of actual fire people, there was 1 that said in car, everyone else was out of car, and we have multiple departments represented. So I feel like in our area, and when we're sharing this, it's kind of hard because most of us are from the same area, unless we get random people in from here or there. But in our area, outside the car is still very much the norm. Would anybody think that's not the case? Is there any department doing that? Yeah, Mike.
Now, I guess I could play a little aside. Are you talking, outside car stationary or a roaming command, in that aspect?
Right. Well,
because I could see everybody's thought of, command is outside the car but stationary, at their vehicle with the trunk popped and their command board set up,
right.
Versus where you have your roaming command,
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting that you bring that up, because I'll give you and again, not my information, but coming from Don Abbott and his research, the difference and what most of the beginning of his presentation was about was listening, just being able to listen and actually hear the crews. Like, obviously when we're talking about, missing maydays, it doesn't matter where you are. It's a matter of actually listening and recognizing that somebody's calling for help. And so outside the car, can you effectively listen when you're out in that environment?
For me, I mean, kind of to go off of it a little bit.
Yeah.
just psychologically, we're all just penetrated with the fact that if you hear those words Mayday, it's one of those things we all know, like, oh shit, you know. So for that to come over the radio, I think that's one of those words that just everybody hears, you know what I mean? Like, but also how much radio traffic is it an area where there's, you know, they have that control of not clogging the airways. You know, I'd like to see the numbers of where, you know, too. But no, I agree.
Where? What do you mean where? I'm sorry.
Like, just not so much where, more or less. I'd like to see, you know, hear a little more from people about like how their radio communications are. Is it constant?
Oh, okay.
You know, like you listen to New York, those guys just it's constant communication, but it's an organized chaos for them. You know, where, you know, you listen to Toledo and you guys have some extreme radio discipline, you know, where you're not talking about Billy's shirt on Division 2. So, but I think if you're going to do an outside command, at least be away from where they're, you know, kind of within visual, but away from the area. You're not getting truck noise. You're not getting just the general work noise.
And so that's what his recommendation was. If you're not going to be in the vehicle, at least have a headset to remove the outside noise, which can be expensive.
So that's what we have actually really for both inside and outside the vehicle. We have these goofy ass headsets that we can plug in both inside and outside and listen. I really like it inside, but outside, I think it's definitely used. I think some chiefs even wear actually a chief I drive on the occasion actually had an earpiece that he wore. And he would just, you know, didn't sense and stop talking sometimes and listen to his earpiece.
And that's an interesting one because I've tried that and it doesn't, for me, unless you spend a lot of money on, regardless of headset or earpiece, it just depends on how high quality it is and how much noise it can block. And I'm trying to think of a way to kind of get different input. Chad, I'll say, because your department was represented on the quiz, on the poll on Facebook, but it wasn't your response, that you guys are primarily running command out of the vehicle. And I will say too, out of the vehicle doesn't mean the chief's car. It can mean sitting in an engine. You know, it could be pulling up as the chief, going to the first 2 engine and sitting in the rig. You know, where are you guys running command from, Chad? And there's no wrong answer here. Everybody does stuff different. That's why we got to talk about it to see.
For me, myself, not running command for a fire, but mostly accidents and other CO calls and stuff like that. It's either front yard or roaming.
Okay.
I think for me, Barrett, I have to agree with Mike on this one, to where if you are on a scene and it's pretty chaotic, obviously you're going to go to a quieter area. Or if the scene gets big enough to where you have to have an operations bureau, it might be wise to have command be in their vehicles. I mean, that's just for smaller departments out towards this area.
And how many of your departments across the board, how many use tactical worksheets or some form of like written documentation?
We
like
do.
Not necessarily documentation, but like keeping track of your crews.
Whiteboards on every incident, just so we're in the practice of doing it. So if we do get the multi-alarm, you know, we do get the high-rise, we do get the old folks home or the apartment building, it's not really the first time that we're messing with those whiteboards. We do it even on gas leaks, which are a 2-in-1 assignment. We do it on that just so we are in the habit of it.
Okay. And when you say a 2-in-1, 2 engines, 1 truck.
Yeah, and just that way, we're not pulling that. The first time we're not pulling that stuff out on an incident isn't the fire showing from the 8th floor of an old folks home.
Gotcha.
So at Berkeley, we have, in the North Hills, we have JOGs, which we're running now. And on all our working fires, you're going to have somebody running accountability, but then command also has their own worksheets that they're going to be using. So like ours is basically units, who's doing what, and that lines up with our JOGs that we're operating under.
And I pulled one up, and you guys can, I adapted from various sources, as it says at the top. And there's so many different versions of these, but this is the one we ended up using the most. This is our sample one that we give to different departments to consider using. But just for some organization's sake, to fill in the blanks and keep track of folks. And you can really make them however you want to, as simple or as detailed as you want. But the idea is that accountability, when it comes to tags, or when it comes to the cow tags, or when it comes to a computer system, accountability really comes down to this, more so in my mind than the accountability system. Because in the moment of a Mayday, I don't really need to know who's on what crew individually. I need to know where that crew was, and I can find out from that firefighter who they are potentially, or hopefully they say it in their who, what, where report. But we just need to know where they are to start getting to them and start getting them help. And this is more the, what engine is it? What's their assignment? And where are they? And as you go, I would just cross it out and do things like that. So the example, basically, I'll give you this, and please feel free to jump in, because I want this to be more a discussion than a preach. I can preach anytime. That's on Sunday instead of Friday. But we had a lot of pushback. We kind of pushed this at my part-time department in Rossford, and we had a lot of pushback. We had a lot of people telling us, and I'll be honest, the reason I pushed it was Chief Nick Martin, who I reference a lot because he's a mentor, he's somebody I follow, because I think he tweaks things from what he's seen in a way that speaks to improving the fire service. And on top of that, having, the Magnolia Street fire, where there was, the incident commander heard the Mayday, but there was a pause. And that pause was enough for my partner and me to kind of look at each other and go, was that what we think it was? And the idea that, even for that second that felt like minutes, that somebody could miss somebody calling for help. I wasn't going to be okay with that. And so we pushed for this change in mindset. And I started doing it primarily when I was in the duty officer role. And I got crap and on accidents and fires and fire alarms, where, like, going back to what Dan said, trusting the crews and letting them kind of do their thing, and practicing for if this became a larger incident, even on an injury accident. Okay, if somebody crashes into the scene, at least if one person's in the car to call for more help, everybody else is outside walking around. At least somebody's in a quiet area, so there's not going to be shouting or screaming or whatever else to call for more help for those people that just something bad happened to them. And the pushback I got was, you're sitting in the heat, or in the summer, you're sitting in the air conditioning. You're comfortable. You are, as comfortable as a 6'6" guy can be in a Crown Victoria. You don't want to do anything. And it's like, that's not it. The incident commander's role is to get us home, and our role is to get the citizens home. And so for the incident commander to do the best job, to hear that Mayday 94% of the time, based on the research that Don Abbott's done, they're hearing it better in the car because of that quiet environment. And I remember Jeff Klein, retired chief from Perrysburg, when we had a tornado in Perrysburg Township, and running the initial incident command for that out of the back of it, and then taking over as the aide to the IC in the back of the truck. And everybody walked up and wanted to say, they want to start talking. They just want to, because that's what we do, right? We're firefighters. That's why it takes 10 of us to put hose back on the rig, because we all want to catch up. And it's like, hey, how's it going? What do you got? You know? And sitting in the car, we had a water rescue. Somebody came up, started doing that. I rolled my window up, because it just gives you that ability to limit your interaction. On top of that, one of the other big pushes to this is the difference between having a 5-watt radio that can go down to 4 watts if you have 3 bars instead of 4, or fewer bars, you're losing your battery, versus having the power to pick up a firefighter's portable radio signal from inside the building. And they're much less likely to be able to hit the repeater, hit the tower, if their radio is horizontal, because it's got to be in the same orientation. And that's what they're finding, is there are firefighters that couldn't get out in the basement because their radio is horizontal. And so even just having that extra power to potentially pick up that radio traffic, and just those it's interesting to hear that data and then take it and apply it and get the pushback of, you're sitting in the car because that's where it's warm. and I guess that's where I didn't know until I knew. I didn't know how important it was to have that sterile environment, almost like a cockpit, right? And to have that ability to sit there and write, and to have a portable radio and a mobile radio right there. And that's something I'll get back to with Lord talking about the FDNY in just a second, because there's a difference there too. But what do you think? I swear I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm just putting information out there. But what are your guys' thoughts? Some of you have been nodding your head. Some of you have been kind of, I got a message for the incident command sheet, which I can absolutely share. What are you guys thinking? Tyler, you were nodding your head a little bit.
I mean, you're making great points. Anywhere I've worked, I've been one of those pass around firefighters for a while. Any command scene I've seen or I've taken, it's always been front yard command. And for the region that I've worked, that's the norm. Like you said, the guys are going to complain if you're sitting inside the car for the heat or the AC. That's all they see is, oh, chief doesn't want to come out and get cold. But I kind of like the idea of being tailgate command, but having a headset, so you can still get outside and see your full picture, but still be able to be secluded enough to where you can hear everything. I'm actually going to propose that at my next officers meeting.
Nice.
Awesome. Get a headset going.
Barrett, I know personally, sod's pretty cheap, and so is grass seed. I'll beach it up in the neighbor's lawn like every day of the week in order to get a view, just out of the front of the buggy. I can't always get in that position. Sometimes I do got to get out and go mobile. It's pretty rare though. But that said, like my response to that is, back to the guys, I'll kid with them and say, yeah, man, they gave me XM in this thing, so I'm really sad. But is like, so yeah, it's you. I know I got air conditioning, a nice cozy seat in here, but you want me as calm and as comfortable as possible, so you can do your job without me breathing down your neck and freaking out. You want me as calm and as comfortable as possible, and then after we're pretty sure that we have the situation stabilized under control, I'll get out, throw my coat on, walk up there and see what the guys did, and you go talk about the work, and then I'll take ladders down and I'll back up hose.
Yeah.
You all get some water. I'll start doing some of this. I don't have any issue doing that. As long as they're pretty certain this situation is stabilized. I have no issue. And I think another part of that too, so we'll drop at work. I know it's loud and county, great. We'll put 2 battalion chiefs on a building fire. And the idea of the 2nd battalion chief is to don their gear and to go be a division supervisor for the 1st. So if the guys see you getting dressed, so they know you're not in the buggy every single time and hiding from fire into work, You know, because you're going out to go fight fire with them. I mean, I think you get some buy-in from that. You know, you're not doing that every time. I mean, I know when I was driving the battalion chief and we were the 2nd Battalion going to a fire, we'd be wrestling each other for the air pack in the back. You know, we're trying to kill each other for the air pack. But I think, you know, it's maybe a way you can get buy-in. I mean, it's fucking easy for me to say. You know, I got 2 battalion chiefs coming, and most people don't know if they got a rig getting out. You know, so it's easy for me to say. But if I pull up as a second, you know, at home, if I pull up as a second duty officer, I'm gonna get dressed, go up to the first one, see if they need anything, and if they don't need anything, you know, I'll go assume a division for them, or I'll go assume, you know, safety or whatever role really that they need filled.
And I want to talk about a specific example, that example that you and I shared. Unless anybody else wants to jump in first, feel free to just unmute yourself and jump.
I'll throw
Chad, please.
Things in there. I do like the headset for command if they're going to be mobile or the front yard command. But I want to throw that question out. What do you do in like the rural setting, like Providence Township, where you have long driveways that you have limited space in the essentially what is the front yard, the jam an engine down there with a lay-in, and then also have at the end of the driveway a dump tank with maybe a relay engine and that type of things going on? Are you going to be able to get that Chiefs buggies back there, or and work that type of command where you can keep visibility, but also...
I think in those situations, Chad, you can probably consider using a neighbor's driveway to get back into. That way you're still close to the house. If you need to get out, you can get out. You can still have a good vantage point. And you're not...
Or even
that's one of our
hop in an engine, Chad.
Rural rescue squad tips is run the rescue squad up the neighbor's driveway, ditch it there, and then, you know, run across the field with your hooks and Halligan bars and go do rescue squad stuff. But yeah, that's typically, if that's the case, you know, obviously if there's a big wood line that's dividing or whatever, you know, it may not be possible. And it's not, you know, it doesn't always work. You know, you're going to have instances where you're not going to be able to get the buggy into place. I'll try like hell, but you know, I mean, I'm all about trying to finagle that buggy into some difficult places, and I like to take a picture of it if I do too.
And Mike had something too, Lord, if you want to jump in.
In a situation like that, I mean, as a command officer, you're not set to just sit in that command vehicle. Go climb into the engine that's closest to the fire, you know, or whatever rig might be in a position for you to actually see. You don't have to stick to just the vehicle, you know. In a Providence situation, I know many of times where you could just have sat right there in the pumping engine that all the lines are coming off of, and you would have had your vantage point, and all you got to do is bring a piece of paper or a whiteboard with you and call it good from there. Don't pigeonhole yourself to just the command vehicle.
Right, I was just playing devil's advocate there too. So
perfect. That's how we figure stuff out.
Well, you know what,
put stuff up here.
I'm not for or against anything. I'm always...
Stop arguing with us, Chad.
But I do every day at work. It's constant. He apologizes. He makes a great point, and then he apologizes for his great point.
Yeah, and you know, like, I get it. Like, dude, your input is super important, and the perspective, like even asking from the devil's advocate perspective, helps us think about it critically, right? Because I'll be completely honest. I'm not set on anything I do. I change my gear occasionally. I change my tactical worksheets occasionally. I change my mentality. I listen to one podcast on search and change the entire way I teach search. Like I preach what I do. You know, I'm not ever going to say you have to run command from the car or people are going to die. Like, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. And that's not going to work for everybody. But I think we overlook some advantages, especially with technology, which is one of the ideas you wanted to talk about today. So I accidentally, in a roundabout way, sideswiped you there. but we overlook some of those options we have because of the way we've always done it, which is that phrase we always go back to and we all groan about. But yet when it comes to incident command, that's the thing that like, well, yeah, we want to see the house. We want to be able to walk around. We want to talk to the crews. We wanted this, we wanted that. And so please absolutely play devil's advocate, because that helps us all flesh out what we want to do or what we want to see our departments do the same or differently, and what those pros and cons are, because everything we do is pros and cons, right?
Right.
It's what are we getting and what are we giving up for it? There is no like it's 100% this way, because there's never 100% in this damn job. It'd be great if there was. We'd remove a lot of variables, but we don't get to control the variables. So no, please, that's perfect. You're stealing my favorite thing to do, which is playing devil's advocate. I picked a side accidentally from the start. So what else do you have in the rig, going back to Lord's comment, that you don't have in the yard typically?
The mobile radio.
Okay, and one more thing.
AC.
No.
Yes, and
no AC.
All right, I'll give you this. What dispatch, tell me what rigs I'm getting.
There's none of those in there either.
And yours, right? There's not?
Just in the rescues.
Okay. Well, then that's a good one to be in then. But for a lot of people, as we've gotten more and more MDTs, and at Rossford, we didn't have them either. I took my own personal iPad toward the end of my time there. And that was my IAR and pre-plans and all that. So I had the pre-plans, I had, and the IAR being I am responding, which is what we did all our pre-plans in. I have access to Google Maps to be able to look at like an overhead view and maybe look for a closer hydrant if for some reason IAR is not working, which most of the time it worked fine. But the idea that we have that tool in front of us too, and then we get out of the vehicle that might have that tool, and yeah, some of them you can take with you because they're tablets now or whatever, but just another thing to consider when you're picking which rig you might sit in. And I'll share this story because there's a couple little things that I learned and experienced, and then that we'll hit on.
Talk to you later, fellas.
We've already hit on. Shut up, Dan. We're trying to have a conversation here. He muted himself.
Hey, Barrett, real quick question for you.
Yeah.
Where were you during our MCI? I was just thinking about that and trying to figure out where your position was during that.
You know what?
I was in in the back of a Yukon with like 3 patients, so I had no idea where you were.
So we had a mass casualty incident after parade in Rossford, where a bunch of high school students were wearing wool uniforms and went down, started dropping like flies, and they started dropping at All Saints Church, and So All Saints Church is right here. And let me pull up satellite because it's going to work so much better for this. So All Saints Church is right here. This was the parade route came down. This is Lime City Road. And most of our patients were actually all of our patients were either in this parking lot where that was as quick as they could make it there. The school buses were actually in this parking lot. Can you guys see the arrow?
Yeah.
Awesome. The school buses were in this part of the parking lot. Another set of school buses for a different school were in this parking lot. And so we had 3 areas in this one complex of patients. And I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. I believe, and Mike, if you remember specifics, feel free to jump in. But it was something like,
it was a lot.
Yeah, like 7 or 8 patients that we assessed and transported 3.
We transported 3, and I want to say there was like, upwards of like close to 10 or something like that.
Yeah, you're right.
I know a whole bus got mass cooled.
Yes. So what? Yeah. So it started here. Actually, Dan, my brother, was on this one. I was on a go-kart or a golf cart, and we had started over here. And then I established command when I realized we had more people dropping, and that arrow actually is pretty much where I was in relation to the rest of the incident. And Chief Druid became my aide actually. So I was kind of like right where the sign is, and we had one patient in the very back of this part of the parking lot. We had several patients in here, and we were having actually my dad was there as triage, and he started triaging patients in that area. And what we ended up doing was just setting up gross decon over here. At one point, we had an individual with the students screaming at my father, not realizing he was also a police officer. Another unit called for police code 3, and I actually went to get out of the car, and Chief Druid was like, nope, stay in the car. I'll go check it out because I'm your aide. So it was like a reminder to me to stay in here, because if they need something, I will call for them. So yeah, I was in the middle of everything, but in the Tahoe. And I think I know what point you're getting to, Mike, with that radio traffic, which is on YouTube. It's under my personal, but I'll load it up on the Fireground training one soon. And what did I sound like at first, Mike? Since I know you use this to teach radio communication.
Oh, you guys ever heard of like a child trying to say something but multiple things at the same time? So they want to talk about like their gummy bears, but also want to talk about a unicorn. So it's like a mixture of gummy bear unicorns.
Okay, I feel like you're embellishing now.
No, at first it was very panicky, because it was the realization of like, oh shit, this just got a lot bigger than what we thought it was going to be. Because like originally it was like one or two people. And if you listen to the traffic,
I've got it. Do you want to listen to it?
Yeah, it almost
part
be
of
better,
it,
because you can hear when you can start to hear the difference when Barrett goes from trying to run around like a chicken with his head cut off to being posted in one spot.
All right. We'll listen to the chicken with its head cut off for a second.
County started an incident for All Saints, female heat exhaustion. Wood County, for the All Saints unit, we've got Bike 2 and the sheriff's cart on scene. Patient's being treated by Oregon Fire.
That's there. Bike 2 and sheriff's cart, 1437.
You can hear the background.
And you can show Bike 1 on scene also.
One also on scene at 1437.
I think I cut all the dead space out of this.
Run to the All Saints.
Oops.
I almost just jumped out of my chair.
Church.
Sorry. I'm trying to fast forward past that.
Medicating there to dispatch. Back to the Wood County, what medic unit do I have responding to All Saints?
County to All Saints Command.
Go ahead, Wood County.
PD is out with another patient. Liberty Center has that subject. Go ahead.
So now we're getting...
Okay, we've got a visual on them. We've got 1, 2, 3 patients right now. 3 yellow patients, all heat exhaustion. Go ahead and start me 2 more medic units. Engine 83 with 4. Bike 1, Wood County.
Bike 1, go ahead.
And show Bike 1 on scene, All Saints.
On your clear at 1440.
So in that spot, you could hear, I'm looking around, counting the number of patients we have, trying to visualize it. So you kind of heard where it sounds like it's a cluster. Mike?
Yeah, he at that point when he said the 3 yellow patients, and that's probably one of the biggest parts I could remember, was he was literally running everywhere to figure it out, because I was, like I said, I was in the back of a car, and he's peeking into the car like, how many patients do you have? And I'm like, what are you doing here? Go away. I'm trying to hold 2 puke bags and talk to another girl. I don't need you yelling at me right now. But it was, like I said, I'm kidding, Barrett. But like I said, at first, if you guys can really hear him kind of like out of breath, and there's a lot going on, and he's not really organized at this moment.
I'm gonna see if I don't remember exactly where the Code 3 police part was, but we should be in the portion now where things are still hectic, but I should be in the car.
Just to give you an update, we've got the 3 patients here. The other patient that makes 4 is the one Medic 30 was already treating. 3 of them are Clay High School band members. 1 is a Liberty Center band member. We do have patient contact with all the patients right now. 332 is triage. And we're continuing triaging and monitoring the rest of the patients.
That's clear.
Mike 1 to triage.
Out of breath, talking fast.
Station 74 is okay. Okay. Tower 83, or correction, engine 83, go assist at Tower 37. They've got 10 patients there. 203, do we need to make this an MCI, or are we comfortable with the fact that most of these are going to be a treat and release?
With the treat and release right now, Rescue Engine 45 has 3 patients on board.
Medic 30 command, we're kicking back in a second. Let us know where you need us. Give us 2 minutes. I'm okay, Medic 30. I'll let you know when you get here. 203, give me a red versus yellow when you get a chance. Or correction, yellow versus green. Count when you get a chance.
Can you pause, Barrett?
Yep.
So, like right here, this is if you everybody can everybody hear the difference in Barrett right now? Like this was the point where he was able to step back and then kind of start delegating that work out to people, and he was secluded from everything. So he was able to just kind of go away, and he sounds so much calmer and so more relaxed, and like now things started getting a lot smoother with the situation and what we had at hand.
So that was part of that. That's the one Mike likes to go to, and that is a good example of. I mean, even just being able to write stuff down. I kept counting out loud to remind myself how many patients we had, and based on Chad, you talking about like, okay, rural department, smaller response. That was kind of what made me think about the other picture I was going to show you that I've now completely lost. There it is. So this was a fire, oddly, that Dan Turner and I were on together. Dan Turner was staying at my, he just texted me. That was perfect timing. He must be on his way back from his run. Dan Turner was staying at my house in town for, I think, a wedding or an Explorers event. And he had signed a ride along form, and he was one of my explorers. So I trusted him, and I knew he was at Loudon. So I trusted him. And so we got this fire first thing in the morning. I think it was like 6:30, middle of the summer. I think it was July 16th, 2018, apparently. And so on the way there, obviously he couldn't drive the car, but when we got there, I'm like, just give me my 360. So I parked in the lawn to leave room for either an ambulance or another chief vehicle in the driveway, and then took command. He did my 360 fire in the Bravo Charlie corner on Division 2. It was in the bathroom, and then we waited. And then we waited because volunteer departments, right? We ended up getting engine 29 from Rossford with like 3 people on it. And Perrysburg City, from just for perspective for people who aren't familiar with this area, Perrysburg City from probably 15 miles away, 10 miles away, at least minutes. They shouldn't be able to beat us in a smaller town that Rossford is. It's not long for our volunteers to get to the station, but we didn't have the staff showing up. And so I'm starting to debate, do I stay in the car and establish command and keep it going? Or do I take the water can upstairs and get something started? If Dan was my aide and he had worked for the department and had his gear with him, he would have been taking the water can upstairs to keep it in check and search along the way, of course. But it was a relatively small fire. It was, I don't think beyond getting in the walls, which is why we took the precaution of obviously getting a supply line, stretching a line. I think they actually extinguished most of it. I wish Turner was on the call again, but they extinguished most of it with a line on the Charlie side. But that was how that worked out, was that crappy feeling of sitting there going, okay, I'm doing what I preach, but I don't have the crews to do the job yet. But establishing that incident command was the priority. because if things did get away or if something did happen, and quickly chiefs were showing up. And this is my next point. I think I ended up with 3 or 4 chiefs on scene, and Josh was my aide again, kind of in that supervisory mentorship role. And then Chief Rodriguez, Deputy Chief Rodriguez from Perrysburg Township, went to the Charlie side to staff the Charlie division. And he's the one who said, hey, just bring the line around back. We're good to go. And we made it happen. And it was great. And I think that's one of those considerations for a department like yours, Chad, is when you've got neighboring departments, even if you can't get them on your auto aid, just request the chief officers or have that established discussion with the chief officers and say, hey, if you're available and we've had crews do it. Actually, that structure fire that we had prior to this that I had initial incident command on, we had a crew from Northwood's far away station from us say, hey, we've got an engine with 4. Do you want us to roll? Yes, absolutely. We've got a working fire. Thank you for saying you were available. And so having the benefit of, yes, being a smaller department where fewer staff may show up, but you're surrounded by departments, or at least have some departments that have 2 chiefs for each department that may be available to come help you in some form or fashion. And then doing the forward deployment, like Turner was talking about, yes, it's important to have a safety officer, but if you're only sending 2 people in, maybe it's more beneficial for the safety of the crews to have that chief officer inside, in this instance, on Division 2 with the crews to supervise and to ensure their safety. And this is, again, information that I've gathered from various sources, and especially Nick Martin's incident command teaching that he pushes a lot, that, your chief officers are the ones with the experience. And oftentimes where I apply that is on these smaller volunteer departments. That could be that this person's first time stretching a line in that door. Why not send a chief with them to help them through the motions if there's not a guaranteed company officer? And in Northern Wood County, we were frequently getting 4 or 5 chiefs. Okay, command, safety, Division 1, Division 2, Charlie Division. I've got all my chiefs. I've got eyes and ears on every floor and on every side of the building if I position a little better than I did here. And that's a resource that even if you only have a couple lines off and that's all you can staff, then those chiefs can be those working chiefs if they need to be, to jump in and help out in more of that company officer role. Is that something you guys would think would work? Tyler, you've been on several different departments of several different kinds. Do you think that's something that would work beyond these examples?
I feel that the time I spent out in Western Lucas County at Providence, because whenever I had a structure fire, I had at least 2 or 3 other departments coming. So that's when Josh or Jason would jump in. And at that point, I have 3 chiefs on scene, and it worked out good. Where I'm at right now, it works out. With Middle of the Township, whenever we get a structure fire, we have a career department coming, whether it be Bowling Green or Perrysburg. They always bring at least 1 chief with them, plus the unit officer. So we're talking 3 officers on scene on a regular alarm. So that very well could work out. That we kind of did that the other day. We got dispatched for a occupied structure fire on 25, Bowling Green Auto Aid. The fire chief actually rode with me in the engine. We had a 4 crew engine. Me as the lieutenant was driving. I had the chief riding shotgun. We had Bowling Green coming with an engine and chief. And fire ended up being out on arrival. But the chief beside me said, hey, you take 1 firefighter and a Bowling Green guy with you, get inside, get it figured out. So we're working toward that by building these auto aid bridges that we have.
And so that forward deployment idea, like getting chiefs into the fire building, that's not unheard of for you. Awesome.
And I like the way it works, especially out with Providence and White House and Waterville. They work wonderfully with each other. It's worked out good from my experience.
So I'm gonna throw a curveball at you guys.
Perfect.
There's so having too many chiefs on scene's bad because it gives no leadership capabilities to the line firefighters, and then once a chief officer isn't on scene, the firefighters don't know anything to go back on. So what I like to start doing, and I've been doing it, if I get on scene and there's a guy from our department, firefighter, that's running the scene well enough, depending on the situation, I just stand back in service and they roll with it because it gives them better leadership responsibilities to know the second time in their head when they catalog it, hey, I've seen this situation before. This is how I'm going to handle it. We walked out of there being safe, and we all go home at the end of the day.
And so you're staffing more of like an aid role then, Chief? You're just kind of there if they need to bounce something off of somebody or
Yep, that's what we've been telling the officers to do.
Awesome.
For the most part, is just, you know, the structure fire to where it's more than a room and contents fire.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel that a chief officer, if they're there, that they should be able to handle it. If they got enough people, that person can be by your side, you know, calling the shots with you. But for the most part, if you just stay in I'm not saying in service for another incident, just be out there as their aid, just to help them out, to make notifications if needed. It seems to be working well.
I guess what's the trade-off in your head then? Is there usually another company officer with that crew that's on that line, or do you send your second dude chief in with that line, or who's there for the leadership inside the building with those crews? Devil's advocate again.
Senior firefighters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel like in and just totally playing from Chad's perspective, I'm just going to call it that instead of calling it devil's advocate for now on tonight. But how do you find that balance between company officers being in that role and being used to, you know, what to report back and being kind of that middle level, right? So we have, I know, you know, Chief, but that strategy, tactics, and then that task level, where now you've got a task level senior firefighter who's bumping up to essentially an acting officer in that role. But when are the company officers getting that good mix of experience?
I feel that they are. I like to call it trial by fire, because there's a chief officer already on scene that's going to help mitigate the issue.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to call, you know, if you have an idea in your head that you're only going to send one firefighter in the building, for example, in the back in your mind, you're like, oh, that's a horrible idea. You can't do that because of the 2 in, 2 out rule. So that chief officer is going to be there, or that officer is going to be there to say, no, that can't happen. You know, you gotta do X to go to Y.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
You know, and we haven't been accustomed to huge raging structure fires like you guys have been in Toledo. I mean, most of ours is room and contents fires, and unless you get into an area that's non-hydrant, by the time you get out there, it's a surround and drown pretty much. But you can't get good leadership qualities if you don't let the guys run the scenes. It's almost like officer development a little bit, because if you don't got the guys that run the scenes, who are we mentoring then?
Mm-hmm. Well, it almost falls more into succession planning than it falls. I mean, you're preparing someone someday to take your spot when you leave.
Correct.
You know, and retire 40, 50 years from now. And and because you can develop those leadership skills following somebody down a hallway with a line, but having that management skill at that next level, if they're already skilled at that tactical level, if it's somebody that isn't as developed, maybe a newer officer at that tactical level, do you bump them back with their crew ever, or if they're doing a good job, they just stay in that spot no matter what?
If they're doing good in that spot, allow them to continue in that spot.
Gotcha.
I mean, you could always bump down to operations, or let them bump down to operations to do something, to let them call the shots. But like I said, if you don't let them in, I mean, you can train all day long, but until you get into that real situation, they're not going to know, and they're not going to feel comfortable.
Tony, your head's nodding a lot.
Well, I don't have a boatload of experience out in Providence with actual work instruction or structure fires. Most of mine came on Toledo, and it was commonplace. I mean, I've been gone 7.5 years from Toledo now, but it was commonplace for if you were not the first arriving officer assuming command until a battalion chief got there, you were suiting up. I mean, we had captains coming in with us, etc. And I've just kind of been listening. And to me, sending a chief in place of another, for the sake of identification, a private or line firefighter, to me, you're taking away a little bit of kind of what Chief Francis was talking about, the opportunity for people to learn to figure some shit out, to understand that it's up to them. And it also, at least in, when I was on Toledo, you had to think for yourself. We were all very well trained, and we drilled a lot. And depending on which station you were at, there were crews that, and I'm still do, function without having to say, you got this, I got this. Everybody knows everybody's skill set very, very well in an organized department. In something like Providence, or your average volunteer, if you're the officer responding, you should have a pretty good idea of what personnel you have on the way, based on, who's, and I am responding, said I'm on the way. You got a couple guys that are going to show up in their own vehicles. So being able to quote unquote pick your team and send them in, because I can see a scenario where by having a chief in there where someone's afraid to make a decision or say, well, they didn't tell me to do this, or, waiting for that direction instead of being a self-starter, instead of trying to think a problem all the way through to its resolution, or at least something of an immediate nature that needs to be decided. If I'm new and the routine is that, well, there's always a command officer with me, or there's always a chief in there, I'm naturally going to defer to whatever the chief, or wait for the chief, out of fear of not wanting to piss this guy off because he's a chief. So, based on their level of certification, based on their level of experience, and, when people get hired at Providence, they kind of go through and see, what have you done? My whole deal, who are you and where are you from, speech. And where, if it's somebody I've never met, and they look at me and say, well, what are you asking me all this for? Well, because I got to know if I'm going to be in the seat or if I'm going to be driving. Because if you're in the seat, you're going to be doing all the radio shit. I need to be able to trust you to ask for the right resources, give the right assignments until somebody else shows up, because you can't get water. So I'm going to have to do that part of it, etc. So, for me, my opinion, which, doesn't count for much, but I'd rather have two line guys, or, lieutenant or a captain company officer going in with the new people, pair somebody who's got some experience up with somebody who doesn't, and somebody who can also teach, someone who's not just going to be an asshole and say, give me that line, and snatch it from them, say, hey, why don't you try this? Or, hey, when we get in there, we're going up and we're going to the left. Someone's going to talk somebody through their first time in, or their second or third time, depending on the situation. So other than that, I don't have much to add. I think incident command, when I first heard it out of a vehicle, sounded like the most ridiculous thing in the world. But then I remember Toledo, and depending on the officer or depending on the private, guys would, want to walk up and shoot the shit with the chief, or talk about something that wasn't important enough to say over the radio, but at least get it in his ear. And by being in a vehicle, like you had said earlier, you can roll out the window. So ignore all that crap, or assign somebody else to be your filter. So I think it's a great idea from a vehicle. Now I'm done.
You don't have to be done. It's
Well, I am.
You always say stuff like that at the end. You're always putting in good stuff.
No, I
And then
say,
you
no,
do the
I'm
same
done.
thing that
Opening
you
the
yell
door
at
for
Chad for.
Chad to go ahead and talk.
Well, yeah, somebody jumped in. Who was that?
When I was a lieutenant, I'd have no problem running command, but
Oh
the
Lord,
reason I
he's
wanted
in
to,
here.
the reason I wanted to get promoted was to be an officer of a group of people. Obviously, not my choosing, but like I would want to pass command off as soon as anybody reasonable got there to take it, because those are my dudes. Like I want to go in with them, make sure they get the job done, make sure they go home. It's just I'm more of a doer. Like so much so where if Barrett got there as a private and I was lieutenant, I would still make Barrett take command and I would go in with my crew.
We have different skill sets.
That's what I loved about him. Lieutenant Dorn always there to go with me. Always had my back.
Lord needed supervision.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
facts.
Talking about the idea of the chief officers going in, I don't want to make it sound like they're taking the spot of the company officer, but if we're keeping the company officer outside to get incident command training, I guess I go back to a moment in my head where I watched, a group of young firefighters of mine starting to go into the building that I was ordering them into, going, oh, that's what that feels like, right? That feeling of like, oh shit, like though, if something happens, right? And we are so often faced with those crews that we don't pick, where it's two brand new firefighters and an officer who takes that initial incident command. And then who are we sending in with that person? So even if you have two brand new firefighters and one more seasoned, even if it's a senior firefighter or an officer, one of the other benefits to kind of go into another direction of other benefits is that if you assign a chief to supervise like Division 1, so and this is going back to that like Nick Martin method that he adapted from, and I saw Chad, your lower third on your screen again, the Chad method, but him taking from like the East Coast style of command, Prince George's County, Maryland, Washington, DC, parts of Pennsylvania that he worked in. So he kind of made this, put this out there as this mentality. But, the first engine and truck, or truck, whether or not, whatever rig you showed up on, but the first engine and whoever's doing search basically are going to the fire floor. So to that fire floor, if you have that engine in that truck company or that attack and search, and basically the first due chief is command, second due chief is that person's aide, and then the third due chief goes to the fire floor. So that way, as Dan, the lieutenant on the attack crew, and Chad, the captain on the search crew, are doing their stuff, those two crews don't have to speak on the radio. They can just tell the chief, who's standing in the hallway looking at all the conditions or kneeling in the hallway looking at all the conditions and reporting back to command. So now you've decreased your span of control for just those two crews by 50%. Then you do the same thing with another line and another truck company and a chief on Division 2. Now you've got two people talking to you on the radio. You've got potentially the whole building covered. And it's two people on the radio, a chief and a chief aide outside, and then probably at some point a safety officer as well. And that was one of the questions when I went to Chief Martin's presentation in Springfield, Ohio, was, well, why don't you talk about the safety officer right up front, right? Because it's a requirement. It's kind of our standard. And he's saying, what's safer than having some of the most experienced members standing back at that strategy level, not tactical, not task level, but standing up there, hands off for the most part, and they'll say absolutely have to get involved, looking at it from that chief's perspective to say, hey, we're not really going to get this. Let's back down to the first floor. And that was, he's like, is that safer? Or is it the guy standing outside pulling the meter who's watching the outside of the building? Where are you putting your next due chief first? It's not a matter of, are you going to fill the position? Of course you're going to fill the position, but you can have a company officer in a staging crew, or you can have your RIT team serve as that company officer role, that officer of that RIT team initially, as safety until somebody else backfills that. But you can't, but nobody can see through the building. Having somebody right there to say, hey, and usually, again, the chief officers that we see are some of the most seasoned people that have seen fires in their careers. And they can react differently and make changes that will dramatically affect crew safety. Even with newer officers, even with senior officers, if they're more focused on moving the hose, which they're very well going to be, then that chief officer can still stand back and say, oh, you know what, guys, hey, let's back out because this is already starting to roll over our heads. But you guys didn't look up because you're stretching the line. And yes, Tony, there are absolutely those kind of moments that they may need to learn for themselves. But that chief officer, being one of the more experienced people, can say, hey guys, if there's time, do stuff like Dan did with his crews and like Alex Hennessy and Ryan Stotzenbach did with us at Rossford as our officers. Hey, come back here for a second. Look up, look at that. That's what you need to be looking for. You need to be moving the line, looking up to look for that or whatever the case is. And again, I don't know. I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer. I just think it's interesting to look at how people do things in other areas and how certain traditions of ours really hang on and really sound, even in the groups of people that are like, oh, I hate it when people say that's the way we've always done it. We run into some of those things that are still those like, oh, well, don't talk about that part though. We can't let the chief sit in the car, right? It boggles my mind. And then on top of that, to say that 94% of the time the chiefs in the cars hear the Mayday the first time versus significantly less, I cannot find the statistic in front of me right now, but significantly less for anywhere else outside the vehicle. It's just like, how do you justify it?
No, I'm not saying, I'm going to take some of the stuff back. I'm not saying that a brand new guy that just gets out of fire 1 class or fire 2 class, oh, hey, you're going to be incident command today when you're on scene. I'm talking seasoned people that you
absolutely.
identify that could potentially eventually be in a leadership position.
Yes, I didn't take it any other way than that.
Yeah.
You're talking your officers that have potential to move up to that next step. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even the seasoned firefighter that's getting ready to get molded up into that leadership position and allow them to.
And that's where a lot of my experience came from. I gave you 2 examples where Chief Druid showed up and said, keep going. I'm going to be your aide. And then it was a matter of forward deploying other chief officers because he was my aide. But that was that same kind of concept where first I retained incident command usually in the duty officer vehicle. And then Josh was very much about that, where it's like, hey, let's give you this experience. And I am so grateful for that because incident command is the thing that I am the nerdiest for. If you haven't noticed, because we're an hour and 20 minutes into this freaking thing, right? Nobody wanted, hey, at least I haven't talked about like NIMS yet or anything.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what he did for me. And I'm so grateful for that. So I completely get that part. And that's where the devil's advocate aspect comes into play, where it's just, how, if nobody challenges us to look at it from that different perspective, we're not going to see the weaknesses or not even weaknesses, but those cons, right? They're, again, always pros and cons. So looking for those cons, and there's different schools of thought. I've talked to one local chief who's like, no, I get there, I take command because ultimately it's my responsibility. Legally, it falls on me. So I'm not going to let someone else maintain responsibility, even if I am right there. If something happens, it's still me who has to answer for it. The other part of his argument was he wants his company out. This is a smaller full-time department. He wants his company officers in with their crews because that's why he put company officers with those crews. But that's a different situation. Since he left that department, they switched that up and started doing it the way you were talking about, Chief, that they let people stay in that command role, but now they're without their, and again, in an area where they're primarily responding as full-time departments, they're now crews going in with no command, with no officer who they train with all the time. So the volunteer component and the part-time component, I think, is different than the different in that respect, potentially, because you have that you don't have that like consistency of the same crew every day where you can get that predictable level.
Correct. And then you can go off of, what's an exterior firefighter versus an interior firefighter. For us, we do black helmets, but we have the shields are a different color, or the stripes on the helmets are a different color. They're red, meaning you can't go in. And then we use green stripes for probationaries, and then we use the yellows for regular firefighters. Well, that's our station. You got Providence that does something else. You got Waterville that does something else. Monclova that does something else. So it's difficult to, when somebody's responding to a call on, they might have 2 people, they might have 3 people on the engine, but how many people are actually interior that can go in?
Absolutely. And then how do you figure that out? And that was something we talked about on, Chad, was it last week's or 2 weeks ago when Chief Hardbarger was here 2 weeks ago. And different ways to kind of get a better idea of who's showing up to your scenes, which was a great conversation, especially because we had a couple guys from West Virginia who had a totally different way that they did that stuff and could weigh in with ideas, and Josh was sitting there writing stuff down. So that was a great discussion too, because you're absolutely right. Now you've got different levels of, who's showing up to your scene. We don't have to talk about command the whole time. I'm good whenever you guys are. I think I got it out of my system. It's just with everything going on this week, and that webinar being fresh on my mind, it was something I thought might be worth talking about, in a timely sense.
You don't got to lie. You can talk about command for days.
Oh, I could, but then people would stop clicking. You know what? If I want to stop doing this thing every Friday night, all I have to do is start making it about incident command every week. And I'd stop getting the text messages like, hey, what are we doing tonight?
I forgot how much Turner likes command. He took a command class when he was like 15.
It's true, I did. And then I was like, wait, what's firefighting?
Yeah, some of us were a little backwards in the way we learn stuff, but, whatever. We figured it out mostly, I think.
We could talk about how to fill out NIMS forms properly, huh?
Ooh, yeah. Let's get into that.
Yikes.
Yep. And then everybody leaves.
I heard NIMS forms. I'm leaving.
It's bad. I almost signed up for the
sheet.
Yes, the NIMS answer sheet. Oh man. So Chad, go ahead. Sorry.
Anytime you have to talk to somebody, you gotta use the proper NIMS form, proper communication.
Oh yeah. The oh God, which one is that? The unit report's 214. But we use that terminology without realizing that it's tied to NIMS. But we won't get into that right now. So one of the things that I did hit on with the MDT, and I said I kind of sideswiped Chad's idea, after hijacking the entire anything that he suggested. And feel free in the chat too, guys, if you have ideas for like next week, if there's something you don't want to talk about tonight, because we're an hour and a half in already. But if there's anything you want to talk about, shoot me a text, whatever. I just make little Post-it notes and put them on the monitor, and then we talk about it. So, and as we talk about them, they get tossed off. So Chad texted me and said, talking about emerging technologies in the fire service and how technology can help us. Oh, Tony's already shaking his head. No, I wish they were in the same room.
No, I already know where he's going. So
whatever you do, Barrett, we got to write it down. Somebody write it down, because it's the same stuff we're going to talk about Thursday night.
Perfect.
He's going to dig on me for saying I want a fucking Carnes Euro helmet.
That's not where he started, actually.
Well, it's on his list. I guarantee it.
Hey, if Tony gets one, I get one, Chad. I've got seniority.
If we get a stimulus check, I'm buying a fucking helmet just to piss Chad off.
Hold on. This is the actual text, and you're not wrong.
I gotta put my glasses on. Hold on.
Oh, okay. I can zoom in a little more, but not much.
One that Combs might find. Yeah. fucker.
So anyway, first I want to say, because of course I haven't spoken enough. I don't even use, I've used my iPad for like live burns just to see if I like it. But other than that, I'm paper and pencil when it comes to my tactical worksheets. I don't like apps. I don't trust things not to freeze. I don't want to focus on anything. And I don't use whiteboards because my arm touches a whiteboard and it's gone. I use paper and pencil or pen and pencil. And another reason I sit in the car or used to sit in the car is so it's not raining on whatever I'm writing on. But I also do have Write in the Rain pads, but I don't rely on technology for that because I just don't trust it yet. And you don't trust, Chad, the SAM system. Explain to us what that is.
SAMS is a completely, I don't want to call it automated, touchscreen PLC based pumping system.
Oh, so did you say PLC?
Electric. Yeah.
What's PLC mean?
Programming logic controller.
You got to talk to us like we're just a bunch of dumb firefighters.
Dude, he went through this thing about Raspberry cards, how it's actually a laptop and a little thing, and my eyes fuzzed over, and he was talking for another half hour the other night. So don't use the acronyms, Chad.
It's still
when Chad talks technology, I act like he's my wife, and I just shake my head like, "Yep,
exactly."
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So to make it to break it down in simple terms, you don't trust the computer controlling the pump on the engine.
Correct.
Okay.
The technology guy does not trust a touchscreen based pumping system.
So I've seen it. I haven't had any opportunity to demo it or mess with it at all. It definitely seems like something that's going to be developed more over the next few years, and it's going to grow. I'm definitely a little skeptical of it for sure. I guess I'd be more okay with it if there's a manual override. So as long as I can go back to my pump panel and do everything myself, which is probably what I'm going to do anyway, just because I know I'm doing it then instead of it says it's opening. I hope it is. Then I'd be more okay with it as long as there's manual override really for it.
So what don't you trust about it, Chad?
Well, there was
being the technology guru that you are.
There are way too many electrical or air operated actuators on the pump. We went out to FDIC 2 years ago and seen a demo pump that there's the fake engine or that fake middle section of the engine, but if you walked around to the back side or the front side, it was completely like glass open. And the amount of wiring and pneumatic lines and electrical solenoids and stuff in there, there's too much that could possibly go wrong.
What would it take for you to not be worried about it?
Not work in a factory.
Okay, but like this is the way this is going, right? Like simpler, easier for everybody. How do we know we're at the point where we've got reliable technology in your eyes? Is there like a certain...
I don't think there is such thing as reliable technology.
I would say the number of times that it's been tested in the heat, in the snow, in the ice, water, desert, everywhere that you can get it to be tested at day and night. So the more times it's been tested, the better off it should be in theory, until you hit it the 1,000th time of trying to get the discharge pressure at something and it doesn't work. I mean, we have an engine that the solenoid freezes up on it frequently, and we can't even get the ladder rack down on it, and we're told to use a glue gun to hold the solenoid together by the manufacturer.
Damn.
because of the road vibration. The road vibration's what knocks the solenoid apart.
That's what I was going to mention was that, how much wear and tear to and from the runs. I mean, Toledo streets suck, and a 2-year-old rig in Toledo's got more mileage than a 10-year-old rig at Providence, where they each to get them brand new. So, how's it going to take the beating of the street and the weather conditions and, the 4 seasons we have up here, salt and water and, humidity intrusion. I don't like the fly-by-wire myself either, but I'm also a technophobe, so hammer and nails.
I'm surprised they don't make more engines like to be capable with the like how the air guard is. Drive and pump with the turrets.
Oh, PTO.
I was gonna say, didn't Perrysburg Township go to those as their like primary rig? Nobody here would know.
So,
I'm
does have a drive and pump capability on one of their new engines.
Okay. Just on one of them?
Just one of them. Yep.
Okay. I knew it was 2 engine purchases ago that they had the roll in, because the idea was to use it for like ditch fires and stuff like that, from what I recall being told.
That's what I believe too.
Okay. It's got to be a price thing then, right, Chief?
It must be. I mean, look at now the medic units that are out there. I mean, before when somebody would request it to be 4-wheel drive, they would laugh at you. But now it's almost standard equipment to have a medic unit that's got 4-wheel drive.
As we're staring down the barrel of a snowstorm this weekend.
Yeah.
So Barrett, I'm going to say it's the wrong application for that technology. People want to stuff technology into everything. Well, not everything has to have technology built into it, or it's not the right step along the process to have the technology built in. So rather than building it in there, I would say let's build it in to a instructional or training simulator where you don't have to wrangle people together, your entire crew, to go out and pull levers somewhere, especially when it's 6 degrees out or something like that. You have a good, reliable simulator that you can get a couple rips through, know what you're looking for, know what levers you're going to pull, and then that way when you go out there, you're not staring at a panel that you've only seen a handful of times. It'll be like playing the game a couple times, and then when you finally get to do it in real life, you'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, I remember this from The Sims. Okay, here it is.
If you use the cheat codes, you can move the bed while they're, you know what, never mind. We don't need to get into that. But yeah, and I guess that brings up my question, or what you said made me wonder, what are you really gaining from what do you think people think they're gaining by putting technology into a pump panel?
So, again, from a product development and product designers, industrial designers point of view, it's going to be the same reason why they make hard, soft, and medium softness toothbrushes, even though your dentist says only ever use the soft. It's because people will buy them. I'm almost convinced that ladder towers were an invention of salespeople as well, because all the limitations that you get with tip load and wet versus dry and ice and this, that, and the other thing, it makes having the ladder on there almost useless. So who came up with that idea? It sounds to me like a guy that can show up at your firehouse and go, hey, you can walk up the stick, Okay, cool, man. But we don't do that.
So explain what ladder tower is to you, because we lose some of the translation sometimes in regional.
It's a ladder with a bucket on the end. So a ladder tower, as opposed to a tower ladder, which is a aerial scope.
See, we're goofy here that people didn't know what TL meant and in our CAD, and so we end up calling things truck ladders, and they're not tower ladders, and they're not ladder towers. Well, they are ladder towers by your definition, but that's the level of confusing terminology we use. So that's the reason I had you clarify. But I get where you're coming from.
Blank, just for clarification, the ladder tower has a ladder for climbing and egress. The tower ladder is just for emergency egress, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just make sure we're all-
The ladder tower is exactly what it's, what I said before. So it'll be your full size walkable ladder, designed for, I guess, egress and access. And then a tower ladder will be not walkable unless for emergency use, i.e. a box beam construction.
So you're saying get rid of anything straight stick or tower ladder. The other one was just a creation for salespeople to sell.
Yeah, I mean, and I never used to think that until I started working off of an actual tower, an aerial scope, and I'm like, yo, the limitations that I have with this thing, all just so I can walk up and down, that some salesman came up with this because it doesn't make sense any other way. The pros that you get out of that are just minuscule.
And this is Blink's tower ladder right here at Progress.
Where's that place?
Just so everybody can, what's that?
Where's that place?
This guy.
Dan Turner, who apparently used to go there.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting take. And that, like, how, and I saw Dave Pekas turn his camera on because he's at an apartment where they have a ladder tower. I do like the terminology there. It is clear. Dave, did you want to chime in with your take on that? Because you're very engineering minded also. I mean, you've got that mindset.
I think it's a personal view. Waterville doesn't get a lot of opportunity to use what they consider a tower ladder, but there's just a number of different views out there as to how it is used. And granted, I agree, they're not climbed a lot, at least in our department.
Do you think, in terms of the engineering, because I know your brain works that way in a much better way than mine does, do you think, how would you describe the limitations versus what you're getting from it? And not, obviously you don't have the apples to oranges comparison between, this that I just showed you and yours, but do you feel frustrated by the restrictions, or do you feel like it works for what you need it for?
Well, to be very honest and very fair, it doesn't get used enough in our department to have that weighed out.
Damn it, Dave, I just want you to argue. I want you to get fired up. No, I'm kidding. No, I appreciate your honesty. And maybe that's part of the equation too. That if it's, I think a lot of the ladders in our area aren't being used in a rescue situation, or aren't arriving with that first due engine like they are in more of a, an East Coast or urban style. I mean, even Toledo is a very engine heavy department with 18 engines and 3 truck companies. So we don't have that, the truck pulls up right before the engine aspect. And so what we end up seeing is more the, Blink, I don't know if you're familiar with this term, but the shower ladder.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's stolen from Jake Hoffman. And he stole it from somebody else, I'm sure, because it's the fire service. But that's what we end up using most of all. And that's why that climbing thing, I think, becomes important and this is regionally for Northwest Ohio, is that's what it ends up being. You're not seeing ladder trucks doing VES from the window or making the roof that way. You're seeing ground ladders primarily, just by the nature of the trucks are not there in the first 3 or 4 rigs, if at all.
Well, here's where I would argue a tactical problem with that too, is a lot of times when you do set up for master stream operations in that regard, you're applying hurricane force water to what? A roof that's designed to shed hurricane force water. So a lot of times it's not really doing anything anyway. Rather than putting the bucket on the ground level or lower level and hitting it from below. That's really the most effective use of aerial master streams, is getting below the roof line and hitting it upwards. It really is the fastest way to put 1,000+ gallons a minute in service with the least amount of manpower. And that is another reason why the tower ladder is superior in that regard than the ladder tower, because you got restrictions over certain GPM when you're going left and right and up and down and that sort of thing. So you gotta watch that. With the ladder being involved, it's a U-shaped member, so without having that top cord to connect, you get torsional stress on that, and that's what causes all that restriction. So just by its design, it kind of leaves a little bit to be desired even in the water application method.
And I've got a couple pictures up here. I know if you're on your phone, you might not be able to see them, but the one, it looks like they were using it the way you're describing for a fire on Division 3 and probably in the cock loft.
Yeah, looks like it.
Okay, so you can see it. Good deal. And then I've got another one here that, sorry, it's not yours, but it is on Progress's page because it was in Harrisburg, it looks like.
Yeah, there you go.
So describe it here for kind of go back, step back tactically again, and describe looking at a scene, what you're talking about tactically here.
Yeah, so it looks like the address that was affected here is probably the one adjacent to it, but let's just pretend it's the food market that's off. This would be what we'd call the storefront sweep. And the aerial scope in particular has one of the shortest landing zone distances, meaning to get the bucket on the ground. And it has full range of motion with the tower pipe, no matter how much you're flowing through it. Whether it's 5 gallons a minute or 2,000, you can run it in any direction, any which way, it doesn't matter. And when you put that thing on the ground, like you
Uh-oh. Did we lose him on the satellite?
So I think what Blink was trying to say was that you can move in any direction. Really, the nice advantage of the aerial scope is that you can move in any direction off either side of the rig as long as you have a good setup. And even then, your setup can be a little wonky on the. Yeah, you can do a short setup, obviously, on the non-working side, like every other rig.
There he is. He might be coming back. He just dinged at us.
Yeah, I'm like between cellular and connecting to my Wi-Fi. I'm coming in, so hang on a second.
Nice. All right. I thought he was buzzing in for the game show. I'm like, I didn't even ask a question. I don't know if there are any more. Oh, we're getting into seeing if there's any other examples in here without. I guess I can.
So, Grant, I have a question for you. In your personal opinion, do you think our ladders and tower ladders are underused in our area?
Who were you asking?
You or anybody, really, Northwest Ohio related.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I'm going to defer to Turner because he's seen both sides of it. He worked on Progress or was a volunteer at Progress and a live-in there. So he saw that different world. Dan, take this one.
I do. I do feel that the ladder trucks are underutilized in Northwest Ohio. And I say that because really, I'm trying to think who said it, and I can't think who it was. Maybe Nick Martin. Is that a lot of fire departments are either very engine oriented or very truck company oriented. So typically, your older, more historical, like very traditional departments are more towards engine oriented because engine puts the fire out. It's pretty easy. You know, I mean, the engine shows up and puts the fire out. Whereas some other departments are more oriented towards truck work. So I do think that there's a whole facet of truck work that's really hard for the fire service to explore just due to a limited amount of working fires and the ability to practice. I know that's something I really struggle with in West Virginia is being able to explore and do special service work with my guys because we just don't have that many working fires really as a whole. So what I'm saying is, yes, I do think that that the truck company is potentially underutilized. And part of the problem is there's so few of them. They're coming from so far away. It's hard for them to get a good position on the building in order to go topside or search or do whatever the truck's supposed to do. Utilities or something? I don't know.
I think, Jared, looking at, I mean, even what was I reading? Report from Engine Company 82. Reading that like 2 years ago on a beach in Florida. God, I miss traveling. Reading that and realizing, you know, between that and buffing in Detroit, going and visiting Progress, going and visiting, you know, or following these East Coast, and East Coast almost sounds like a dirty term to people in the pseudo Midwest. And I say pseudo for no reason other than I just don't want to say Midwest. But you know, following these people from other places that are more traditional, but also we're a department, like my department has been around since 1837, I think. And we used to have 5 or 6 truck companies, and looking at places that are similar in size, like Buffalo or Buffalo's a big one that stands out. I'm trying to think of who else is relative in size to us. I think Kansas City, Missouri is. There are other departments. You look at like the average truck company versus engine company breakdown, and you have, and I've looked at it a lot because I am a data nerd and I like to understand this stuff. You have half the number of trucks you have engines. So a city, in basic theory, a city that has 18 engines would theoretically have somewhere around 9 trucks. And we used to be closer to that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you. Oh, does it have? I'm trying to look. Oh, it only has 3 trucks in the picture. There's a picture that I have on my wall that it's got too much reflection in it right now. But there's 3 trucks in the picture from Toledo, from like 5 blocks that way, from 1970 something. There's a Cadillac hearse ambulance on the road also. You know, we as cuts happened, the importance was put on getting water to the fire. And that's where I think, from my understanding of the history of our department, that's where we shifted to an engine-centric department. And being the, you know, every region has its hub department that people look to. Around Columbus, it's Columbus Fire. That's why everybody has patches that look like Columbus Fire, and they work together. I'm sure around Cincinnati, it's Cincinnati Fire. How does Cincy do it? Well, the smaller departments kind of adopt similar tactics and similar perspectives. You know, you look at how RIT developed in Toledo and then spread to the suburbs. You look at how the safety officer position has kind of mimicked, because we see that it works and we listen to their fires. And I'm talking from even my Toledo years. We looked at Toledo to figure out, hey, they're going to 400 fires a year. How do they do it? So as Toledo moved away from the truck companies, because the importance was getting engines to the fire, and we had fewer staff with cuts in the 90s, the 80s and the 90s, then the suburbs lost that mentality too, where trucks weren't the same thing. So where truck work, when I do my after action reports, I don't care what rig people showed up on, but I break it down into engine work, truck work, and rescue work. You got the special services are separated in my mind that way, because we've held on to some of the rescue stuff. You know, Rescue 7 goes in and does a search most of the time. 3 people into search, checking the whole building. The trucks, depending on their position, we've got some awesome truck guys. It's just a matter of actually getting the positioning and getting there quickly. And so when you go to a place to buff like Detroit and you watch their truck get on scene before their engine, and they're rolling out the station at the same time, the first 2 engine, the first 2 truck, and they maybe get a second truck, that's where it's like, oh my God, that's how it's supposed to work. Because the truck goes in first without a line, searches for the fire, searches for the victims, and makes it way easier on me on the nozzle. I don't have to go in dragging a charged hose line, because that's our policy since Magnolia, essentially, is that we go in with a charged hose line. And now I'm dragging a charged hose line looking for fire, when a truck company could have gone in and looked for fire and victims and told me, hey, take a left turn at this door. I just watched a video from Stockton earlier where Stockton, California posts some amazing helmet cam video for training. It's amazing for us to be able to use for training in Fire 1 and Fire 2 classes, because it really breaks down for the citizens what they're seeing. So for Fire 1 and Fire 2 students, it does the same. And they posted one and showed the truck company saying, yep, take a left here, go in, it's a right into that room. You just saved me having to stretch all the way to the back of the house to realize I walked past the damn door. And so, yeah, I think truck work, not just in terms of like venting roofs and outside vent and VES as a standing tactic, not a they're in that window right there, I 100% guarantee it tactic. I think we've lost trucks as search. We've lost trucks as find the fire ahead of the engine and save them, that trouble. Opening up so the engine can focus on moving that line. I think it's become one of those things in our area where the jack of all trades thing, by on some level necessity, and on some level, we don't have a box alarm system. We don't have, you're primarily in the mutual aid settings from the departments I've worked on, you're getting other people's engines. You're not really getting other people's trucks. And if you are getting their trucks, it's not coinciding with the arrival of the first two engines. So we're not using them that same way. That was my way longer answer than Turner to also say yes. I think we underutilize them and we've lost the perspective. And I cringe when I hear, no, we're surrounded by trucks, we don't need to get one, when I was on the suburb side of things. Because I'd argue, okay, and going back to Blink's comment, like I'd argue, no, we just give me a mid mount is what we had at Rossford. So give me an aerial scope. Let me show you how it's different tactically. At least give us one option, and people would be like, oh, you just want an aerial scope because it's cool looking. Well, yeah, not only is it cool looking, but it also offers an entirely different set of tactics in an easier way, in a way that its design is made to accommodate. But instead, we just look at something with a ladder on top, assume all three types essentially are the same, 4 types maybe, are the same, and say, no, we got a bunch of them. And that's all well and good until you got the garden style apartment off, or the storefront off, or the downtown off. And now you're calling ladder trucks from an hour away because you don't have enough to get ahead of the fire to get stuff opened up. And then I don't know. It's just, it was one of the classes I put in for NOVFA this year, which was canceled due to obviously the ongoing COVID pandemic, but was looking at Northwest Ohio and its perspective on trucks and how it's changed. And I think we could benefit from, you're not going to change it back. You're not going to have volunteer stations that are going to be able to staff, Rossford's not going to be able to roll out the engine and the truck at the same time. But could we put 2 trucks on the first out, on the running order for a first alarm, instead of putting 6 engines or something like that? You know what I mean?
Right. So I think really what it comes down to is having the, at Rossford, we had the automatic aid agreement, and you're going into like the box alarm idea, which we don't have in this area. So what I'm getting at is, I'm thinking if we had that box alarm idea, the kind of like closest appropriate unit, maybe type dispatching, that could bring back the truck work to our area.
It could to an extent. I think it so much too would come down to the mindset of understanding the assignments in that way too. Okay. Understanding that I will say, I don't care what kind of rig it is. If you show up and you have to do truck work, you should be able to do truck work. Well, that's out of necessity right now. But if we would have to consciously, not only in our training, split engine, truck, but we'd also have to look at the kind of trucks we're buying. We're buying primarily quints in our area. We're not buying even straight sticks. We're buying quints with buckets typically, or the ladder towers that have pumps. And that's for flexibility. And so there would have to be a long-term commitment to justify buying aerial scopes and obviously not having pumps on them. to that kind of mindset in terms of fighting fire. And I don't think we're going to see that change, because we've grown so accustomed to the quint mindset of, okay, if we roll the quint out the door first, even though we're not calling it a quint, we have both water, hose, ladder, we have everything. So I think the box alarm assignments could in theory work, but you're still not going to get the arrival time. I think where it would work best is in our area, the suburbs that are staffed full-time and surrounded by full-time. So the Sylvanias, the Springfields,
Absolutely.
you know, where you can roll. I mean, Sylvania's got a tiller. So they roll the tiller out, and I don't know their procedures. I'm not super familiar with, I'm trying to get more familiar with them because they've changed a lot recently, in terms of having a battalion chief now on staff or on duty. But if you roll the tiller and the engine out together and they arrive at the same time, or the tiller arrives before the engine stops short versus driving past, or like we see so often outside of, you know, naming departments, but in any department where people still stop in front of the house because we're not used to thinking about trucks. Blink, what would happen if somebody parked in front of the house for you guys?
Well, that's where you have operators and not just people that drive the tower. So one of the beauties of a mid-mount too is somebody can basically park in front of the building. And
I mean an engine. If an engine stops in front of the building when you have a truck on your assignment.
That's what I mean.
Okay. I'm sorry.
It makes it nice because you don't have to horse around with 40 feet of vehicle to get in position.
Mm-hmm.
If you come around the block, if somebody lets you know ahead of time, you can come around the block, go nose to nose, and you're basically there anyway. Even if you have to back down the street or whatever, chances are you're going to have a little bit more flexibility that way. But your quint points and stuff like that, I would argue there too that that's almost another salesperson pitch as well. Even though you are quote unquote coming with everything, you're not really, because you're coming with half the tank that you would normally come with on a fire engine, maybe a third of the hose. 90% of the time you don't have a long line. So how are you going to get around to the back? How are you going to deal with a larger setback? You don't have enough supply line in a lot of cases, unless your hydrants are super close. I've heard them argued, oh, it's a great thing to have in the rural area. Oh, really? So where there isn't any water, no hydrants, and setbacks that are really, really far back.
Mm-hmm.
So I would argue that that's another thing that gets you set up for trouble rather than success, because a lot of times when I've seen quints operate, they just make the fire mad. You squirt a little bit and then the lines go dry and everybody's walking out waiting for the engine to finally get here or whatever. And it's like, maybe that should have been an engine instead of a quint when it comes down to it. You know, maybe that area needed an engine as opposed to the running the truck. So,
Blank, I had friends before you started talking tonight. I think I'm now fresh out. And Bear, just to go off the positioning thing quick, I know something that we will do in progress is that there's some expectation of the officer that's riding the seat of the engine as they're going down the road, looking at their maps, figuring out where they're going to lay out from, because we're also very strong proponents of the first engine laying a supply line or taking their own water. Mm-hmm. As they're looking at that, you know, they are to call to the truck and tell them if they're pulling past or stopping short, just so the truck knows which way to come in. You know, they know if they need to alter their route or if they can come in directly behind the engine or what. So typically your call out going down the road, tower from the engine, we're going to be pulling past. Now the tower knows they're going to come in behind us. They're going to jack out and then set up, or tower.
They're going to do what?
Jack out. You know.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. No, I just want to make sure I heard that right.
Yes.
Yeah, easily the front seat rider of the fire engine there has the absolute most stressful job, I think. Riding front seat of the tower, you just got to get there, basically. That engine rider, man, oof, that's really what
I literally hate that spot.
Yeah.
We will argue about who has to ride the seat of the engine.
But
Jared,
let's not forget how we got on this topic was the overuse of technology, or maybe not the right use and that sort of thing. And actually, I was just thinking about this earlier. So the new scope that you saw there has electronic over hydraulic controls for everything. Now there is backups, of course, but it makes it very difficult to feather and to do super complicated setups across, like, let's say 3 planes, right? So if you're at an intersection and you're crossways across the intersection, so you have 3 roads that are coming together on a triple compound miter, essentially. It was very difficult to feather the jacks to get the truck level or within operational range. We really had to get it close with the electronics, pop the panel, which is really easy, just 2 thumb screws. It's actually one of the easiest override mechanisms to get into, and I've run Pierces and I've run Scopes, and I think E1s as well. And this is by far the easiest to get into. 2 thumb screws, quarter turn, boom, you're into the hydraulic controls. But there's still some, like, you have to hold this lever down while you're doing other things. It's not nearly as easy as the 2001 scope that went to Waxhaw, that was pure hydraulic controls, that you could really feather those jacks in and get them nice where you needed to go on difficult terrain like you would find in Pennsylvania for sure, West Virginia, anywhere where there's major landscape obstacles and that sort of thing. So again, it's great that it's multiplexed and all this other stuff, but that I probably would have left alone.
So the improvement for the sake of improvement and the sake of sales pitches and putting something cool on the brochure,
right?
Versus function. We're losing function
and really
gaining nothing.
Mind, right, exactly. And really, the whole multiplex system is nothing more than just so you know that the jack's down or something like that. It makes for the nice green display or whatever. It shows, oh yeah, there's a compartment door open or something. It all runs on the same thing. But to do its primary function, you now have to fight the system. So I would much rather it be, let's keep the jacks manual, complete hydraulic controls, but go ahead and make electronic over hydraulic up in the bucket. So that way, if you go for it, because you can jam the joystick to the right and then go swing it all the way to the left, no big deal, and it will come to a gradual stop, pause for like 2 or 3 seconds, and then continue motion in the opposite direction. It won't stop and jerk you and throw you out of the bucket or anything like that. Now that has to do with the multiplexing and the electronics that are built in. That I agree with. On the jacks, not so much.
So look for opportunities to improve safety, but was there any reason that would affect safety with the jacks? Is there any perspective someone could take and go, well, yeah, you can make it actually safer to ride in it, but this also makes it safer from the jacks perspective.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess you could, but like when it comes down to it, it's no different than the old manual version. It's the same check valves. It just has electronics, I guess, that would verify that the check valves are checking. I don't know. Again, it just makes it for so that you can get in the cab basically and see that, oh, all jacks are up or whatever. Well, you can see that you can do that mechanically as well. Limit switches. It has limit switches anyways. It just it's just another. It rides on top of it, so it's just another redundancy, I guess. But in that regard, that application of that technology is hampering its primary function, and the same way with the pump, right? the application of that technology into the pump is hampering and complicating its primary function, and that's to reliably get lines charged in a quick manner, and with reliability being the key right there. You should be able to bush fix it if you need to. Like, something just shouldn't go zap and you're like, oh well, it's electronics, so here we are.
And that's when this conversation started, Chad, that was like the phrase that came to mind from my first pump training from Lieutenant Brian Henry, who just retired at Toledo, was at the very basic level. This is like, when it came down to everything else, if you have a problem, this is a machine.
Mm-hmm.
It is your fault. whatever, everything you're doing, everything that goes wrong is because you did something wrong with the machine. It is only as smart as you are, and it's only going to do what you tell it to do. So now when you kind of pose the question, now in my head, it's like, then you add in, this is only a computer, and it's not that simple. now that gets to a whole other level where that instruction is meaningless. Now it's, roll the dice. Is it you? Is it the rig? Is it the computer?
Yeah, and then throw environmental factors in.
Yeah, and Chad, you're muted, but yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. And then the environmental factors, the what ifs, if you're in the middle of a fire and that valve loses power or that valve loses air. Other than making a fancy UI that a Gen Z can come in and pull 150 PSI to their lay by dragging and dropping it over there, I don't see a good application for it.
Well, we had the preset button on an engine at a department that I worked for, and that was one of the limiting factors for me to learn to be a good pump operator, was because that was the training. Put it in pump, put it in park, put it in pump, get out of the rig and press the preset button.
Right.
And then listen for him to tell you up or down. That was it. And I didn't know to ask more questions, and I probably should have. I should have said, how am I going to troubleshoot this thing? But that was kind of that beginning of leading to that, where it's just, when it's easy and when it works, it's great. It's super simple. But we aren't in the business of everything working and it being great.
Right. Like, if I can get enough people to fill the seats in Providence's engine 1 every time, that truck, I'm going to fight you for the driver's seat, even if I am the officer, because I absolutely love pumping on that truck.
Some of the old rigs, man, they're great. Well, this would be a great conversation to invite, the apparatus manufacturers and to have that discussion, because
next week we'll have Richard Brown.
You know what? I was thinking that he might be watching. But he's a no nonsense kind of guy. So that might be an interesting perspective. That part, it is, it's just, it's kind of like, God, there's how many different, it's sales. How many different things are out there that exist just to exist and don't exist? And maybe that's kind of the big takeaway from this whole thing is, even if it's something as simple as looking at the 10 piece or the 10 function tool that you want to keep in your pocket. Yeah, but what tool are you really going to need out of all that? Simplicity in a high stress environment is going to be a key to functioning. So when you get that 5-piece tool out that allows you to shut the gas off and allows you to use a spanner, but really what you're going to need it for is to cut the wires off of you, why not just have the thing that's going to cut the wires off of you? And I think a lot of us get there on our own anyway, as we realize, my pockets have gotten lighter as I've gotten more into the fire service. I have less shit than I ever have before in my pockets. And I think stressing that, whether it's the rig, whether it's your pockets, simplicity and asking what's the improvement really for? And that doesn't even need to be equipment. Tactics. Are we changing it because that's the way it's always been? Are we changing it just to go against that? Or are we changing it because it actually gives us some sort of improvement? Are we adding tactical worksheets in to make it more functional? Does it work with what we're looking for? Or is it something we're doing because somebody saw it on Facebook or because some idiot in a hat said, hey, you need to do this? We need thinking firefighters, right? This is not the tie-in I was going for, but also this is the tie-in I was going for. We need to be thinking firefighters, whether we're deciding where we're opening up in a house or what line we're taking in or what tactics we're going to use or where we're going to run command or what aerial scope we're going to buy, hopefully at some point. That'd be so great. But being a thinking firefighter is such a recurring phrase in our classes. And with that, I want to show you guys something you've probably already seen. And then we'll wrap it up. We will not have time for Euro helmets tonight, Tony and Chad, but next week we're going to do it. It'll be the whole thing. It'll be Tony, you got to show up because this is going to be great. I cannot wait. And I'm going to try and get our one of my friends, James, who has 2 of them, to get on the call too. And I want to hear it. Let's play it out. Let's make it. Tell your friends. It's celebrity deathmatch, Euro helmets versus traditional helmets. And
I can set the table just by saying Chad's whole argument is I wore one for an hour at FDIC and it sucks. Okay. Have you used one? I've never used one. I'm a gadget guy, but like what you were just talking about how much stuff do you have in your pockets? When I was a carpenter, I had every freaking tool in my pouches and I'd be walking rafters and guys are looking going, what the hell are you doing? And 3 years later, I had a tape measure, a hammer, and the nails I needed. That was it. Nothing else. But for situational awareness, heat protection, etc., I think there's some obvious benefits. And for a technology guy like Chad, not to, he doesn't like it. He also talked me into a, Apple TV, which sucks ass.
I feel like we're at the point where you should be laying on a couch and we should be letting you just
right.
vent for about another 50 minutes, and then we'll schedule you for next week. But
I don't have much to bring to the table as far as the Euro helmet, other than that I think it's worth investigating.
I will see if I can get a friend who actually has it, and I presume has used it because he's got 2 of them. And he's also big into the Toledo Firefighters Museum. So maybe he could talk about that too as part of the incentive to get him in here. But with that, we'll save that for next week. I just want to show you guys because Brandon Link did our new logo, which is awesome. He has been putting up with my incessant Facebook messages of, well, what about this? Or what about this? Or can we change this? For way too long, but we finally got to where I wasn't being told, no, that's going to look bad. And I love it because I'm going to see if I can zoom in and make this work, because Squarespace only does so much when it comes to the size of it. But I love the fact that, first of all, it's no longer a Maltese cross because everybody has that. But second of all, it really speaks to what I was just talking about. And one of our big things that we stress in the classes is being a thinking firefighter. So having that brain as part of the logo and having fire on your mind, like I often do, and you guys do also, because we're obviously spending our Friday nights doing this. He nailed it. That icon was in the first draft he sent me, and it was like, that is the missing piece of what I've been looking for the identity of Fireground Training, or the Fireground Training Bureau. We added the terminology a little bit too, changed it up. I could not be happier. Link, thank you for doing that. If you want to plug any of your services, feel free. If people want to get a hold of you, or if you're not soliciting projects, that's fine too.
No, I'm always happy to to help somebody out if they need to. Yeah, man, thanks for letting me do it. it wasn't as bad as you think it was. For real though, it helps a lot when somebody has a direction that they want to go in, instead of like we talked about, me guessing a lot of times and not being able to read your mind properly.
I think most of my feeling bad is because I hate the little projects I've done here and there for people like really quick on a non, on a very like amateur level of graphic stuff. Usually it's just like, oh, can you make that Comic Sans though? So that's where my experience lies. And you're working with like actual real clients who understand that you're the expert and you are an actual expert versus just, me faking it. So I think that's where like I felt so apprehensive about being like, no, but yeah, absolutely. You made the process so easy. And if anybody's looking for design work, he is your dude, because this was awesome.
Add me on Facebook, send me a message or whatever. And yeah, we can talk about it. I only have a few ground rules, and I told Barrett no standard stuff, no multis crosses, no any of that stuff, unless it kind of has to be. And I've broken that rule once or twice. It's just too pervasive, and I want my stuff and by extension your stuff to jump off the wall to whatever. That way somebody could stand back 10 feet and go, oh, that's my department because it doesn't look like everybody else's, or that's my logo, it doesn't look like anybody else's. So that's my goal with that kind of thing. It's a symbol that's overused, even though there is history there. It just it kind of seems to fade into a blur when it's all said and done. But no, it was a good project. I had fun doing it, and came up with a couple unused graphics that found a later home too.
I just pulled up some of your other work just so they could see a variety of it. But yeah, just giving you the plug here at the end, and yeah, definitely get a hold of him. You said Facebook's the best way. Just add you there.
Yeah. If you want to do that, or that's my Gerbil site there. You can send a message either way.
Cool.
You can also call 717-545-3031. Every live-in at the firehouse is his personal secretary. So they all have his schedule book, and they can pencil you in for I think he's got a couple like 6:42 to 6:48 a.m. Appointments that are open, but you can't really. He's got upcharge if you go past 6:48. So he's a hard guy to get a hold of. Just kidding. I love you.
Before too much profession of love, anyone else have any parting thoughts as we close out tonight and look forward to what'll surely be a controversial and heated discussion next Friday night? Dan, you've got your hand raised.
I just have two things. One of them, there's a podcast I'm listening to recently called the Getting Salty podcast. It's a couple of retired guys from New York City, and they're hysterical. They bring their other retired friends on. It's really worth listening to, not only from the history standpoint, but also their knowledge, and their stories are phenomenal. The second part is
here's their YouTube page. I'll link it on the with this video somewhere. I'll send it out to the group too.
We lost one of our guys this morning. He killed himself. So I just asked you look out for each other. If someone's acting differently, you ask them why. And you just try to get to know the people around you and care for them. Look out for each other, and if you see something, say something. That's it.
Dan, was that somebody in Hartman and Mueller's class?
It was not. No, it was someone in the class after them.
Oh, okay. Croner's class.
No, I think newer than Croner's class. Yeah, newer than Croner's.
Okay.
Yeah, just graduated 3 weeks ago.
Wow.
From the academy 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Oh, God, freaking heartbreaking, man. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out too. Yeah.
Yep. See something, say something.
Absolutely. Mike, you got your hand up.
Euro helmets are dumb.
All right. Of course. That's great. Thank you guys all for being here, as always, for us to have an awesome discussion. And his hand's back up, but I'm not doing it again. Not taking that bait twice. Fool me once, shame on you.
No, I didn't mean to do it that time. I promise.
Good. Okay.
Hey, Mike, when do you take that medic test again?
Uncle Tony.
Wow.
I'm not gonna say when I'm gonna take it again because that's bad juju.
That was like everyone on camera cringed at the same time and like had a physical reaction to that comment.
But also remember, Uncle Tony, I don't need to take those blue pills because I'm still a young buck. And Rossford just built a brand new 55 and up apartment complex. I'll find you the best room they've got and get you in there. We'll get you
if they made orthotics, I wouldn't need the pills.
Just when it feels like this is too much of a webinar to be called the kitchen table talk.
No, it's the kitchen table.
You make it just like the freaking Engine House kitchen table. Thank you guys for doing this. And hopefully at some point we can do this at somebody's real Engine House kitchen table and just do a live stream from there. But until then, we'll see you next Friday. Send me your ideas, post them on the Fireground chanting page, email them to us, fireground4.com with any thoughts, random questions. I'm going to read, actually got a guest post coming up from Blink also, something that came up as we were talking about other stuff. So just reach out. And if you need anything, going back to what Dan was saying about their firefighter, if there's anybody that needs anything at all, anybody to talk to, reach out to me, reach out to each other, and continue to be safe and keep thinking of those folks that working around you. Everybody's got stuff going on. It's a rough time anyway, and look out for each other. So you guys are the best. I love you all, and we'll see you next week.
Love you too, brothers. See you.
Good night. See you next week.